Now that you understand why accessibility is important to your business, let's talk about how to implement it. The most common standard for web accessibility is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Version 2 was released in December of 2008 and updated to 2.1 in June 2018. Version 2.2 is due out in mid-2022. You'll need to check with your workplace as to which version you're required to comply with. Now, WCAG is based on 4 principles. The first principle is perceivable. This means that information and user interface components must be presented to users so that they can be perceived. An example of this would be to include captions on a video for those that can't hear it. The second principle is operable. Now, this means that user interface components and navigation must be operable by any technology. Now, this might be something like a link that could be activated either by a mouse or the enter button. The third principle is understandable, and this means that information and the operation of user interface components must be understandable. Now, this could be an error message on a form that explains where a problem is and how to fix it. And the fourth principle is robust. This means that the content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted by a wide range of technologies. This would mean ensuring a website can be opened in any browser or by any assistive technology. Together, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, known as the PAW principles, are the 4 guiding principles of WCAG. WCAG contains 13 guidelines in total, each belonging to one of these principles. These 13 guidelines contain a number of testable statements across 3 levels of compliance. Level A sets a minimum level of accessibility, while meeting level AAA guidelines indicates a high level of accessibility. WCAG is complemented by local standards for ICT products and services. Now, this might be the European Standard for Digital Accessibility or Section 508 in the US, just to name a few. One last thing to remember, compliance doesn't automatically mean ease of use. Meeting your obligations under WCAG and other standards is the beginning of good design and not the end. So, who should make this happen? Well, every organisation is different, but as long as everyone knows their role and responsibilities, they can ensure that accessibility is considered throughout the process. Let's look at who might be responsible for what on a project such as developing a new website. Analysis. These people help us to understand how to marry the needs of the business with the needs of the customer. On our project, they'll tell us how to comply with relevant accessibility standards and perhaps even think about how to target an accessible market with our final product. UX. These people work in user experience, or UX. They research the needs and preferences of their users across tasks and processes. They might do some user testing of our website prototype or develop some user profiles to better understand who will be using our product. UI. These people are responsible for user interaction. They'll research and design user interface components. They will consider how our users interact with our websites and on what devices or what assistive technologies. Visual design. These people implement inclusive design principles in the look and feel of their products. When designing our websites, they'll choose the elements that don't just look good and match our brand, but are also easy to perceive and use. Development. These people are responsible for the development, including the coding and delivery of the product. When building our websites, they'll be sure to include semantic HTML and ARIA where needed, so the website works for everyone. Content authors. Any media on our website needs to be perceivable through multiple senses. These people would add alt text, captions, transcripts, and audio descriptions wherever needed. Testers and quality assurance. These people are, in many ways, the last line of defence. They'll conduct final checks for usability compliance and accessibility standards and catch any errors that might have slipped through. Now, these are just the basics, and they may differ from your organisation's roles and responsibilities. Ultimately, responsibility for accessibility should occur at every stage in the design and development process.
Intopia.